Ahmad Fadil al-Kalaileh, as the records showed, had been troubled since childhood, taking the hard path from vandalism to drugs and alcohol to more serious crimes. He was born October 30, 1966, to parents of working-class Jordanian stock. A civil servant, father who worked for Zarqa's municipal government, and a devoutly religious mother who doted on the young boy above his 7 sisters and 2 brothers. The family lived in a modest 2-story house perched on a hill above a large cemetery where Zarqa's working class buries its dead. The graveyard assembles a few thousand crumbling, hand-lettered tombstones strewn across a sloping lot overrun with weeds and feral cats. It is also the closest thing in the neighborhood to a public park. The boy, who would become Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, spent countless hours playing in the cemetery as a child. Later, when he was a teen, the graves became the backdrop for his first forays into delinquency and crime. The Kalailehs came from a large and respectable East Bank tribe, the Bani Hassans, a biographical fact that normally carried certain advantages for a young man looking to make connections and find work in a patriarchal society like Jordan. But Zarqawi had blown one opportunity after another. He dropped out of high school despite above average grades and test scores showing an aptitude for art. He skated through 2 years of compulsory military service, but then got himself fired from a city job his father had arranged for him. His criminal career began at age 12. He had cut a neighborhood boy in a street fight and progressed to pimping, drug dealing, and assault. By his late teens, he had acquired tattoos and a reputation as a heavy drinker and street tough who took pleasure in brutalizing his victims and opponents with fist or blade. His idea of a sexual conquest, according to security officials and to acquaintances who knew him at the time, was to force himself on younger men as a way to humiliate and assert his own dominance. He was 21 when he married his cousin Intisar, who quickly bore him a daughter, but Zarqawi's great love remained his mother. Dalah al-Kalaileh fretted over her troubled youngest son, but she never stopped believing in his basic goodness or gave up her certitude that he would make something of himself. She also understood her son's intellectual limitations. Years later, when journalists would show up at her house to ask about Zarqawi's reported accomplishments as a terrorist commander and bomb maker, she would seem genuinely amused. He wasn't that smart, she told an American reporter. She allowed that her boy was committed to Islam, but explained his decision to join a jihadist movement as the only option available to a young man who couldn't find a real job at home. My son is a good man, an ordinary man, a victim of injustice, she said. It was his mother who nudged Zarqawi into joining the Islamists. She signed him up for religion classes at the local Al Hussein Ben Ali Mosque, hoping he would find better role models among the imams and pious youth with their theological debates and fundraising drives to benefit Muslim holy warriors in Afghanistan. To everyone's surprise, Zarqawi plunged into Islam with all the passion he had once reserved for his criminal pursuits. He swore off drinking and became a regular at Quran discussions and Friday prayers. He devoured propaganda videos and audio cassettes on the sectarian wars being fought in Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Chechnya. And when the prayer leader at the local mosque asked for volunteers to fight against the communist oppressors of Afghanistan's Muslims, Zarqawi's hand shot up. He arrived at the Afghanistan-Pakistan frontier in the spring of 1989, weeks after the last Soviet troops withdrew, but just in time to join the Islamist assault on the pro-Moscow Afghan government that was left to fend for itself after the Russians pulled out. One of the Afghan veterans who greeted him at the airport would later remember a wiry young man who seemed eager but also oddly self-conscious. He said little, explaining at one point that he was embarrassed to speak, fearing he would betray his inadequate schooling and thin grasp of the Quran. Although it was already hot, he insisted on wearing long sleeves to cover up his tattoos. We all knew who he was. He had been this notorious tough guy in Zarqa, said Hudhaifa Azam, a fellow Afghan fighter and son of the influential Palestinian cleric Abdullah Azam, regarded by many as the father of the global jihad movement. Now he had found religion and he was very much ashamed of his tattoos. You could see him covering up his hands self-consciously. Yeah.